Okay, folks, it's just about 2 o'clock, so let's get started. Good day, everyone. Welcome to Safe Passage, San Antonio's Land Bridge by Teresa Shumaker. Please mute your audio and stop your video now. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into chat. When you're recognized, you'll be able to state your question. A convenient way to do that on Zoom is to hold down your space bar. It's a push-to-talk switch on the Zoom system. The advanced training lead for this project is Lisa Belcher, who will introduce our speaker now.
Good afternoon. I am really excited about today's presentation. We've been working on this for quite a while, and I'm so excited that Teresa is here with us today. Teresa Shumaker was born in Houston and has lived in both San Antonio and Austin growing up. She has a Bachelor's of Science degree in psychology with a focus in neuroscience and animal behavior, as well as 2 Associate of Arts degrees in psychology and photography. Teresa began her career as a zookeeper at the San Antonio Zoo, working with primates, bats, medium-sized cats, and bears. She owned her own photography company from 2007 to 2011. She paused this career when her husband, Matt, joined the Coast Guard and they began to travel for work. While in Northern California, she worked as a reporter and photographer at the Mendocino Beacon and was awarded 1 national and 4 state awards in journalism for her photography and writing. When Teresa returned to Texas in 2014, she worked with Sea Island Incorporated in South Padre Island, where she was given the honor of creating a new public communications position to increase the awareness of the sea turtle plight. In 2017, she returned back to San Antonio and worked as the communications director at Douglas King Seeds, which is a native grass seed company, before finding a home at the Phil Hardberger Park Conservancy in 2019. Teresa has had an equally active career as a volunteer. She is an active master naturalist and is a member of local chapters of the Audubon Society, Native Plant Society, and Native Prairies Association. She has participated in numerous citizen science bird surveys, assisted in marine mammal center in mammal rescues in Northern California, conducted red-crowned parrot research for Texas Parks and Wildlife in Brownsville, and has served as the vice president of the local Native Prairie Association of Texas chapter from 2019 to December 2020. She and Matt are about to celebrate their 10th anniversary, and they have 2 children, a daughter named River and a son named Finn. And Teresa, so excited for you here, and take it away.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to get set up really quickly and share my screen. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for inviting me to talk today. I'm really excited to talk to y'all about the Robert L.B. Tobin Land Bridge here at Phil Hardberger Park in San Antonio, Texas. My name's Teresa Shumaker, and I am the Associate Director of the Phil Hardberger Park Conservancy. And before I get into talking about the land bridge, I wanted to give y'all a little bit of context about the park and the vision behind developing the land bridge. Let's see here. Phil Hardberger Park Conservancy is a nonprofit that was developed in 2006 when the land for the park came up for sale. It was historically a dairy farm owned by Max and Minnie Velker. The citizens in the area were concerned that this property was going to go up for development, and they created a coalition to kind of pull people together and interest and influence and try to make this a park. Then over the years, they became involved in fundraising for the different development of the park, and they played a key player in getting public input and helping shape the design and the master plan of Phil Hardberger Park. One of the ways that we're able to do so much, it's just two people on staff, me and my executive director, Denise Gross, is we are a partner with a lot of different entities in San Antonio and in the state in order to help fulfill our mission of connecting people to nature. We work very closely with the City of Parks and Recreation, who owns the park, and they have an education coordinator here who runs a lot of the programs, and we work closely with them. We work with the Native Plant Society, the Master Gardeners, and the Texas Master Naturalists. And then we also partner with Texas Children in Nature and Texan by Nature to kind of get our message out on a statewide platform as well. We're really excited to brag that we are the home of the Alamo Area Master Naturalists. They do their trainings here in the park, and they also manage 3 projects: the Bird Water Feature, which is a water bubbler and bird blind over by our Salado Outdoor Classroom; the Butterfly Learning Center, which is an outdoor garden and classroom; and the Native Plant Wildscape Demonstration Garden. They also help facilitate 2 different programs, a series of programs, the 3rd Saturday programs and the 4th Saturday programs. And the 4th Saturday programs have been running since the park was purchased before it even opened in 2009, so about 11, 12 years now. And their program started as a way to get people who weren't comfortable going out and hiking or didn't think that nature and them were a good fit. And so they started on these small trails, less than a mile long, and they had a series of speakers that would lead the walks and would talk about some element in the ecology in the park. It has since grown, and over the years, new presenters have come in. And one of my favorite talks that they do in that series is they do poetry in the park, where they have a poet come out and lead a writing workshop on the trails. So to give you a little bit of context, Phil Hardberger Park sits in north central of San Antonio. We have the park is 330 acres, and it has about 8 miles of trails winding through the park. And those trails are now fully connected now that we have the Robert L.B. Tobin Land Bridge connecting all of them. We're also connected to the greater the greater Howard Peak Greenway trails, which is about 40 miles now fully connected. Once that project is complete, it should be about 80 to 100 miles all connecting together throughout San Antonio. Phil Hardberger Park was designed with the ethos of being a learning landscape and a place for people to go out and play. We have 2 playgrounds and 2 shaded dog parks, and then we also have a children's nature play area next to one of the playgrounds that was devised out of kids already using it as an area to play and climb trees. And so park naturalists went out and they mulched that area, and a lot of the trees that were taken down during the clearing for the foot of the land bridge were reclaimed and repurposed in this area. And it's really great to see the children will build a teepee one way, and then a few days later you'll go and there'll be a teepee on the other side of the playground area. And so it's always great to see what their little imaginations are creating. We have 3 conservation projects in the park. The first is our savanna. Historically, there was a lot of grassland that wove through the park, but as we've controlled wildflowers, the wooded areas encroached. So when the park was opening up, the park naturalists did a project with 500 volunteers. They had a huge planting day, and they cleared out about 13 acres of land and plugged in and planted seeds of native grasses, and have since been able to manage the savanna in our area. Another project that we've been able to do is there was an area where stormwater runoff was coming in from the neighboring development, and it was creating stagnant pools of water. And so the park naturalists took an area about the size of 2 acres, and they reimagined it and rechanneled the flow of water and added some different plant mixes that could kind of help filter all that water. And now it's an area that is an active wetland whenever we have rainy seasons, and it doesn't pool that water and keep it stagnant. And then we also have our restored old maintenance yard at our trailhead, and that is the area where historically we had the maintenance there, and we had some trailers, and then they were able to move to a new facility, and the construction crew of the land bridge was housed in that area. And once the land bridge was complete and they were able to move out, park staff went through and removed the road and removed the trailers and removed all of the compact soil and replanted it. And now within a year, it's about a half an acre of grassland prairie that's just thriving with wildlife. It's been really exciting to see the different species that are now taking advantage of that area. Historically, this was a dairy farm. It was initially 1,000 acres, but we were able to save 330 acres of this property. And on the where the homestead was, they left most of the land untouched. But where the homestead was, we have designated as a historic area, and it is now home to. We still have a working windmill. We have the dairy barn has been restored. The Conservancy's office is in the 1840 stone house that's been rehabilitated, and thankfully it's got air conditioning in there now, so we're able to accommodate well. We have the Butterfly Learning Center, which I mentioned is one of the Master Naturalist projects. That's over in the historic area. And then we have our award-winning Children's Vegetable Garden, which is a Master Gardeners project. And that's really great. The children come every week for 16 weeks in the spring and 16 weeks in the fall, and they work with master gardeners, planting alongside them and taking classes, learning what vegetables to plant when, and then how to harvest, and then what to do with the food once you've harvested it. We have the Urban Ecology Center, which has a great facility for large gathering when we have a lot of different presentations come out, and that's where I'm talking to you from today. It also has a classroom, and then nearby we have another one of the Master Naturalist projects, which is the Native Plant Wildscape Demonstration Garden. And this garden is a demonstration of what it would look like if you were to plant these natives in your yard, and it has a deer protected fence to show what it looks like planting in your front yard where you might have deer pressure, and planting in your backyard where deer can't access it. And so it shows the best plants to choose for those different areas. One of the exciting things, or the really fascinating things I think about the Phil Hardberger Park, is everything in the park was designed with this idea of being a learning landscape. And I'll go back for just one second. The Urban Ecology Center and our other building, the Salado Outdoor Classroom, they run on solar, and they both have water reclamation at the area that they use for irrigating the bird water feature or other elements around the landscape. The Salado Outdoor Classroom is really great too. We have a lot of outdoor, like the children's programs, like our Growing Up Wild. We also have this really neat Salado Creek overlook. We have a dry creek bed that during rain events fills up rather quickly and becomes a very active creek bed. And then just a few days after a rain event goes right back to being dry. And a lot of karst limestone can be seen over there. We have the Burrow Pit, which is a really neat area where historically Max and Minnie Velker would go and remove the soil to use in paving their roads throughout the dairy farm. And over the years, they have exposed some of the geology in the walls there, and you can see some of the karst limestone and the different stratification of soil. And that's a great place for our geology classes. And then we have our famous tree. It's called Phil's tree because when he first came out to the property and was looking around, he discovered this over 400-year-old tree and very famously hugged it, and it was captured by an Express News photographer, and it kind of became this iconic image of him wanting to save this park. So when Phil Hardberger was mayor in 2006, and he was looking for an area to develop a park because San Antonio's development had outpaced its green space developments. And so when he heard that this property was going up, he went and visited that very day. Max and Minnie Velker thankfully did not clear cut this land. They allowed the land to be as it was and just allowed their cows to graze through the woods. So there's a lot of old growth ash juniper and a lot of old growth live oak trees throughout the park that just make it a neat feature that it isn't seen in many other places in San Antonio. As the story goes, he came back that very afternoon and told then city manager Cheryl Scully that let's see what we could do. Can we afford to purchase this land and make it a city park? And she said, I don't know, but I'll find out. And stayed up all that night poring over the city's budget, and that morning said yes, that the city could, in fact, afford to purchase the land. And so he said within 60 days, the city had that property under contract, which he refers to as a municipal miracle. But he was very motivated to save this property and make it a park. When they were looking at the land, though, plans were underway to develop Wurzbach Parkway, which is a much needed roadway through the north side of San Antonio. And it effectively divided straight in half Phil Hardberger Park. And as y'all, I'm sure, are aware of, habitat fragmentation is a very real concern. And the speed limit on this road is 60 miles per hour. So wildlife is in very much danger trying to cross this over. Steve Stimson and his team, they were the architects, the landscape architects of the park, and they were the ones to get the credit of designing the concept of land bridge. And at the time, there was not any land bridges like this in North America. The reason why this one is unique is up until that point, all the land bridges or wildlife crossings were just accommodating wildlife. And they had a vision to create something different, to create something that would accommodate both the park visitor and the wildlife in the park, and also kind of be an extension of the habitat in the park. So one of the first things they wanted to do is they wanted to make sure that it was like traveling over the land bridge is like going up a hill. And so it's got a nice gentle slope, and it's got the native landscape that continues throughout the park. The trail, if you can see over here on the upper right-hand corner, is moved to one side of the land bridge. And the center of the land bridge, there's a low earth berm. And on the other side is the vegetation in a wildlife corridor. So wildlife can travel up and down the land bridge during the day while people are on it, partially obscured from the public. And then the jewel on top of the land bridge is they also designed a skywalk that takes the traveler from one of our trails called Waterloop Trail and slowly goes up into the live oak canopy and deposits the visitor on top of the land bridge. And this has become a favorite of our birders. Going through, since we're now up elevated into the canopy, it makes it a little bit easier to see on top, and we have spotted crested caracaras and barred owls nesting not too far off of this area. We also have 2 wildlife blinds on the land bridge. They are in collaboration with the Public Arts Department. We had 2 local artists design the skins of these wildlife blinds. The one in the upper left corner is called Lightbox, and it is all the holes are to mimic the topography within the park, and hidden within those silhouettes are shapes of animals that you would find within the area of the park. Then the second one, which is the larger photo, that one's called In Nature, and that one has silhouettes of art of the native plants that you would find all around the area. And outside of each one of these wildlife blinds is a water bubbler, or like a water feature. You can kind of see it in the larger photo if you look to the left above the wildlife blinds label. Each one has a little bubbler that and drips water to draw, to create that sound to draw wildlife in to explore the land bridge. And speaking of water, the things that feed the wildlife bubblers is this 250,000 gallon cistern that is buried underneath this valley right here. If you look at the left-hand photo, you can't see where it is now, but at the upper right-hand corner, you can see how big that area was. Just look at that size compared to the tractors there. So it was a 250,000 gallon cistern, and it collects rainwater from within the park and any rainwater that rushes off of the top of the land bridge. And the water in that cistern is used to feed the wildlife bubblers, and then also the permanent irrigation of the trees on top of the land bridge. So the construction was, it seemed a little bit lopsided. We were eagerly waiting in anticipation for a while. The construction began in November 2018, and it took till about January of 2020 before something was really visible. It took them a long time to kind of clear and prepare the sites. But once they started building on the abutments, which is what these are called, these are essentially the feet where all the pressure of the land bridge goes. It started moving really quickly, and we were very excited. So by April of 2020, they started bringing in the girders. There were 16 that went over Wurzbach Parkway, and each one was 80,000 pounds. And so they had to close down the roadway and crane them into place. It was really exciting to watch. Then by the summer, they started doing the wood forms. And this is a great photo that one of the workers caught one stormy day. He just caught that lightning striking in the park, and it just really surprised everyone. The shell and the shape of the land bridge was poured in place. So they created this wooden form, and then they poured in the concrete in place to kind of make this Pringle chip shape of the land bridge. And so by September 2020, the concrete was set, and they started working on putting the moisture barriers. And then by the following month, we started to see the landscaping installed and the earthwork began. By December 2020, the land bridge was complete, and we were able to walk across it. And see, I have a video of the highlights to show you. Hopefully it works. Let's see here. There we go. This here is the footprint of the land bridge that the first work that they did. And it seems rather big, but they worked really closely with the city's arborists to try and protect as many heritage trees as possible. They worked oftentimes at night, especially when it was hot, to stay cool. Here's them pouring in the cement. In total, there was over 5,000 cubic yards of concrete poured in and 450 tons of rebar. Here's them placing the girders. And then those sticks in between are the wood forms. There's that last piece. There's the wood form almost complete, and then they installed the rebar on top, and then they poured in the concrete. Those white blocks there are geofoam blocks, and they were put in to kind of create some fill, but not add weight to the land bridge. And then there's the earthwork. And then here's how it looked when it opened. Now, one thing you might notice is that the vegetation hasn't grown in just yet. Partially due to the pandemic, they delayed, landscaping got delayed slightly. And so all of the native seeds and plants were there. They just hadn't had a chance to establish by the time the land bridge opened. Oops. I apologize. Something happened with sharing my screen. Let me try this again. Okay. Let's see here. Let me get my Zoom back, and I will share the screen one more time. I apologize. There we go. All right, so here is the land bridge when it first opened. And real quick, I want to tell you a little bit about the vegetation in the park. So San Antonio sits in Bexar County, and Bexar County is the convergence of 4 different ecoregions. And I'm sure that y'all are aware an ecoregion kind of is a collection of similar geologic structures, soil structures, and then the plants and animals that come along with those vegetation communities. And we have in Hardberger Park, we have about 3 of those ecoregions present within the park. And we have live oak woodlands, we have mesquite scrub, we have ash juniper woodlands, and then we have live oak and mixed deciduous woodlands and cedar elms as well. So when they were designing the land bridge and putting in the landscaping, they wanted to make sure that they echoed a lot of that same vegetation community. So it would be just like a continuation in the park. One of the things that they did was when they were clearing the area to create the footprint of the land bridge, they scraped all the soil, the natural soil out of the area, and they set it aside for storage. And right before they started installing the landscaping, they put it back to preserve all of that seed bank and microbiota. In total, they planted about 11 species of trees, 6 species of shrubs, 10 species of grasses, 6 of wildflowers or forbs, and 3 different cactuses. And this was, they planted the full, like the potted plants. In addition, they also used 4 Native American seed mixes throughout the land bridge. In total, they planted over 700 trees and over 4,100 potted plants of mixed shrubs, grasses, and wildflowers. Some of the species of trees that were planted were Inaqua, blue wood condalia, cedar elm, pictured here on the left, dogwood, lacy oak, mountain laurel, and we got Texas live oak on the right, Texas persimmon, and red oak. And if anybody is interested, I can provide a full list of all the species that were planted on the land bridge after this. I'll email after this talk. We have the shrubs. I'm sorry, I'm having a technical problem. One more time. There we go. So some of the shrubs are planted on the land bridge are agarita, common buttonbush, evergreen, and flame leaf sumac, fragrant sumac, and yaupon holly. Then we also have sotol, Texas prickly pear, and twisted leaf yucca. And then we have a lot of grasses, so many I decided I'm not going to list them all, but we do have the big 4 prairie species present. We have big blue stem, little blue stem, switchgrass, and Indian grass. We have inland sea oats and a few other of those really great bunch grasses. And then we have mealy blue sage, rock rose, blue bonnets, Texas lantana, zexmenia, and then a lot of seeded in species as well. While I was preparing for this talk, I decided to take a walk on the land bridge and see what exactly was blooming at the time. And I was surprised to see a lot of things that were blooming were not even planted by the landscapers. So a lot of this maybe came from the seed bank or blew in or was brought in by wildlife. We have about 5 large stands of sacred datura. We have silverleaf nightshade and buffalo bird nightshade blooming on the land bridge right now. We have frostweed and clammy weed blooming and common sunflowers throughout. And then one of the grasses that I was surprised wasn't in any of the seed mixes, but I found it on the land bridge, is hairy grama. And it's one of my favorite. I really love the little seed heads that kind of look like caterpillars. So here is what, to give you a comparison, this is what the landscape looked like in December 2020 when we opened. Everything had just been planted. And as you know, with natives, they need a couple of growing seasons to really kind of come into their own and establish. And in just 2 growing seasons, it has done it. It has completely filled in, and it has been really exciting to see. And now the land bridge is an extension of the habitat throughout the park. And so one of the things, excuse me one second, one of the things about the land bridge and the design, well, every element in the design went to kind of reinforcing the idea of encouraging wildlife to use the land bridge, and right down to the vegetation and every single species that was chosen in the area. And in April of 2021, the park naturalists started a wildlife study to see what animals were actually accessing the land bridge. And immediately they started getting results. One of the first, oh, here you go. Here's a picture of the trap cameras and the locations on the land bridge. So they wanted to make sure that they were covering all the different spots that they could. They started out with 9 cameras throughout the land bridge. And one of the first species that they were able to capture was actually a doe being a little bit problematic. She was caught stripping a sumac tree that had just been planted on the land bridge. So that triggered the park naturalists to go back and kind of do some deer protection on the younger plants that were installed. That way they'd get a fighting chance to get bigger before the deer started feeding on them heavily. And then the next species that was seen, and I'm not sure if you could see my mouse, it's kind of hard to see, but it was a cottontail rabbit down here on the lower right-hand side. And then we got a possum. And then we had coyote. And then about this time, it was a few weeks into the study, they ran into a huge problem. The cameras were taking pictures of everything that triggered it. And it was a mixed use land bridge. And so people were walking by all the time, and they wound up with hundreds of thousands of photos that were just untenable to try and work with. And so they had to pause the study for a little while they figured out what was going on. And thanks to a donation through the Conservancy, we were able to buy them 9 new cameras that you can program when they were on and when they were taking pictures. And so they eliminated the bulk of the daytime hours and went for like towards twilight, overnight, and towards sunrise and early in the morning. So they would eliminate most of the park visitors. And here's the reconics, and they were able to capture this red-shouldered hawk, looks like it's pouncing on something. And they quickly started getting some really exciting pictures of species. First, we had bobcats. We've had them several times since then, so they seem to be pretty prolific in the park. We had a gray fox. And then we had this really wonderful rare sighting of a ringtail cat here in the park with what looks like it had caught a Texas spiny lizard. And this garnered a lot of attention. We actually had people, or we had a couple of stories published on this as well. But by the first anniversary of the land bridge, all species known to mammal species known to reside in the park were seen on the land bridge. And so we were really excited to see that at the very least, wildlife are approaching the land bridge. And now the park naturalists are doing the really hard part where they're comparing the photos of each camera to see if they can prove that the animals are in fact traversing the land bridge. And that's part of their 5-year study. So they're just now starting the data analysis, and we're hoping in the next year or so, they'll have some interesting finds to share with us about that. And then we just recently published our coffee table book that has some of the information about the land bridge and photos of the construction on it. And we're a member-based or a donation-based nonprofit that supports activities in the park. And so if you're interested to check out the book or become a member or anything, every little bit helps. So, well, I went through that very quickly, but I'm really excited to answer everybody's questions and talk to everybody about this. So, did y'all have any questions?
Teresa, thank you so much. Mel and I are going to sort of monitor the questions here. So our first question is from Verva. If you would please unmute and ask your question.
Sure. I was thinking that the highway is very long and animals establish trails. You see that anytime you're walking in the woods. How do you encourage they redirect those trails to use the land bridge instead of still stepping out on the highway?
That's a great question. So what we did is if you could see here, there's the steel wall on top of the land bridge. And at the very end of each steel wall, there is game fencing. And that goes around the slope of the land bridge and down and along Wurzbach Parkway. So they can no longer cross the highway there. We also have, as part of the Wurzbach Parkway's construction, a little north and a little south of this picture here, there's underground culverts. Those culverts were designed with drainage in mind, but wildlife, the smaller wildlife, have been using that as well. So there's technically 3 options for wildlife to cross Wurzbach Parkway in Hardberger Park.
Are there any other questions? I think we're pretty much blown away with this presentation. Very, very wonderful. Cliff, would you like to unmute? Oh, I guess he's not really asking a question. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
We're very interested in connecting our lands. We have several pieces of property that we manage that are bisected by roads, but they're close by. It's just a road keeping them apart. And we've had a couple conversations with Fish and Wildlife Service that we're speaking with TxDOT, and then it just kind of fell off the map. And so how did I mean, because, you know, there's lots of places that could use a land bridge, but how did it start and how did it get funded and how did, you know, et cetera? Like, where can you start? You know, how do you get this kind of thing going?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I will say that Texas is becoming more and more wildlife crossing friendly every day. There's a lot of, let's see here, I was reading in the Texas Monthly that Texas now has 33 wildlife crossings and they have 23 in planting. A lot of those are in planning. A lot of those are in planning for South Texas area with the ocelots. But TxDOT has really turned around and become more amenable. And we had to work closely with TxDOT for this land bridge. I will say that we had an ace in our pocket with Phil Hardberger. He was a well-known county judge and was the mayor of San Antonio for, I think, 2004 to 2009. And so he had a lot of great connections and he knew the people in San Antonio. And the way that he was able to get it to fruition is he made a funding deal with the city of San Antonio. And the Phil Hardberger Park Conservancy raised $10 million and the city pitched in $13 million from the 2017 city bond. And in total, this land bridge cost $23 million. But and what I've learned in the culverts going under the road, it's a lot cheaper to do those kind of projects. However, a lot of the large animals like white-tailed deer and stuff don't go through culverts because they're much larger or they don't like to be in that confined of a space. But your coyotes and your possums and your raccoons and ocelots and bobcats and stuff, they have no problem using the culverts. And there's been a lot of evidence of them using the culverts, not only in Phil Hardberger Park, but also in South Texas as well. As far as getting your project started again, I would say just keep talking to people and identifying the people that you can, you know, your constituents and representatives of your area to see who would lend you an ear and can be an ally in getting this project moving forward for you.
Thank you. I have heard good things about TxDOT and that they're kind of coming around, seeing the benefits of this, you know, less vehicle accidents, because they're looking at, you know, how is it going to benefit people? Their first, of course, their charter is to, you know, help the people of Texas, not necessarily the wildlife. So it's good to know that they're kind of looking at this in a different way. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and to give you a little bit more context, you know, it's almost like a snowball effect has been happening. The first wildlife crossing that we commonly think of today was in France in the 1950s. And the first wildlife crossing in North America, Canada led the way with Banff National Park, where they have those crossings over there, that highway that cuts through their park. And that came in the 80s. And over time, they were able to show that it was actually helping not only the wildlife, but people. And let's see, I have that fact somewhere. In Banff, so we don't have roadkill numbers for Wurzbach Parkway. Unfortunately, they weren't tracking that. So I don't have the stats on that. But Banff was able to show an 80% reduction in wildlife collisions once they installed their land bridges. And the land bridge in Colorado, they were able to show a 90% reduction. And it's not just the animals that they're saving, but people get injured too when they strike wildlife. I was reading a statistic about 200 people die annually from striking wildlife, another 26,000 a year injured. And so, you know, we're really starting to see that this has great benefits. It's not just, you know, spending a lot of money to do something nice for wildlife. It's helping them and it's helping us simultaneously. And since the 80s, you know, more and more land bridges have been built. And I think within the last 10 years, the plans have just skyrocketed. Everybody is starting to look at the possibilities of wildlife crossings and seeing what they can do. And one of the exciting things is our land bridge was the first land bridge in North America that thought, hey, you know what, we can accommodate both people and wildlife. Let's see if it works. And within the first year, we've seen wildlife using the land bridge. So it seems to be working. And now you'll have the land bridge, very similar structure coming in Houston. And so the more examples that we have of this kind of stuff working, I think the more developers will be open to this idea and installing it in other places.
Teresa,
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Teresa, we have a number of questions in chat and a hand raised, so I'm going to start with them in order here. Let's see, Diane had a question.
Oh, do you want me to talk?
I do.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you very much. My husband and I went to San Antonio last spring and specifically visited your park so we could walk over the land bridge, and I thought it was wonderful. So congratulations. I think it was a fabulous park. Everybody should go see their park. But part of my question is, it's an island surrounded by subdivisions and city. And so are the animals that are in the park trapped in there and they can't get out and go anywhere else? Or can they still wander around and find other places to go besides over your land bridge and back again?
That's a very great question. I would say the answer was partially yes, they were trapped for a while until we opened the land bridge, especially the animals in the southern part of the park that was not connected to the greater Salado Creek Greenway. And but now that we have the land bridge, all 330 acres within the park has access to that 40 miles of trail that weaves a complete semicircle through San Antonio. And the plans are to continue we call it an emerald necklace, and to continue developing the trails throughout the area. Another thing that San Antonio is doing a really big push is we were one of the first to jump on the National Wildlife Federation's Monarch Pledge. And we very quickly in the first couple of years checked off 24 of the items in there, and we have coalitions of people that are trying really hard to increase awareness about creating pockets of habitat within our front yards and our backyards, and really kind of learning how to live with wildlife. And so we have a lot of with the master naturalists, they're spreading that message with our native plant demonstration garden and our butterfly learning center, and we have a lot of native plant giveaways in the park in collaboration with these programs. And so habitat fragmentation is a huge problem. It's probably the greatest threat to wildlife right now. And I think there's a really a changing in the zeitgeist around thinking about, like, let's not just save area for wildlife over there. We're not going to be able to undo all of this human development. So let's make it to where our yards and our parks and our public spaces and business spaces are more of like hopping pads for wildlife, and support their needs as well.
Thank you, Teresa. Let's go to Linda. She has her hand up.
Oh yeah, I had a question. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Okay, thanks. I had a question with my hand up and also a typed question, and they're both the same because I wasn't sure how to use this. But I was wondering, we've been in several of the parks that connect around San Antonio, and was wondering, I don't know, did you call it an emerald chain? When will all of those be connected all the way around the city?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer for how long it's going to take, but there is plans to continue opening up different places as I think the big challenge is finding those properties, those corridors that can be purchased by the city to connect the trails to each other. And just last year, we had 2 major connections happen. So the Howard Peak Greenway Trail System is the name of the entire unit, but there's sections, and each section is named after the creekways that it follows. And so we are by the Salado Creek, so we had the Salado Creek Greenway Trail, and we were connected to about 14 miles of that. And then they just opened up a northern section that connects Eisenhower Park to the Greenway Trails, which is north of us. And that extended that one chunk to be about 20 miles. And then over near Friedrich Park, they connected another section, which was the Leon Valley Trail System, which was also about 20 miles to it. And so it went from being, a small piece to all of a sudden we had this huge connection, and they're actively working on the southern hemisphere of the circle right now.
Thank you so much. That's really just wonderful, and a great presentation too.
Thank you. And yeah, and one of the things I think is such a visionary aspect is they're trying to connect the different parks to each other. So you wouldn't have to get in a car necessarily. If you wanted to walk for a long distance, or if you wanted to have a day of cycling, you could access these different areas without being on a road at all.
That's what it looked like to me. So that's really a great vision.
And then one, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, we had some more questions, but go ahead.
Go ahead.
Teresa,
Oh, I just
sorry.
wanted to share that Phil Hardberger is also participating in the Great Springs project, which is a similar project that's trying to connect trails from San Antonio through New Braunfels, San Marcos, all the way to Austin. And so it's similar to that emerald necklace.
That's really cool. Mike, you want to ask your question?
Yeah. How do you manage drainage from the bridge? You mentioned a moisture barrier over the concrete, but how's the drainage managed? How thick is the soil? How did you structure the soil so that you would get a natural growth of foliage over that area?
A great question. So there was a lot of interesting engineering that went into this. And actually, a small tidbit of information, Arup is the engineers who designed the land bridge, and they're also the firm that designed the Sydney Opera House, or did the engineering for the Sydney Opera House. So we have a lot of faith in what they've done. At the apex, like I mentioned earlier, the land bridge is like a Pringle shape. At the apex of the land bridge, the soil is only about 3 feet deep, and it deepens as it goes out to the ends. And so they tried to have more grassland towards the center, and like the larger tree species were planted out to the side. So we have a lot of native plants that are really kind of going to act as a sponge to bring that water into the soil and not have as much runoff. And then, remember when I was showing y'all the abutments that were essentially the foot of the land bridge? Right about there on either side, there's French drains underground that help whenever we have a lot of rain that really saturates the ground, helps run off that excess moisture. And one of those French drains on the southern side feeds in towards that cistern. And on the other side, it just kind of dissipates out into the park. And so those are the elements that are kind of helping control excessive water. And then because the soil is so shallow at the apex, they weren't entirely sure if natural rainfall would be enough to sustain these trees, since the trees can't get a rooting down much farther than the 3 feet and hit the soil barrier. So we have permanent irrigation next to each one of the trees that was planted up on the top there to kind of help them during the dry season so they don't get parched.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Suzanne, I'm not sure your question's been answered, but you want to ask it?
Sure. I was just curious. You talked about there being, several land bridges like this around the world, not even just here. When you have parks that are more intercity, I mean, large parks, but they're more in the middle of town than some that are on the edges of town, how does that compare in the wildlife that you see, the use of the land bridge by the wildlife? Do you know?
I don't know if there's been any specific studies on land bridges, rural compared to urban. I do know that Phil Hardberger Park is a natural area park. So we're not like we're managed differently than some other city parks, in that everything that we do is about maintaining that native habitat and managing for wildlife. So on top of, having the native vegetation, we also, when a tree dies, we don't take it down, and we allow it to stay up and be a snag so we can have those nest cavities. And when it falls down, as long as it hasn't fallen down over a trail, we leave it so it can create shelter for small animals and food for decomposers. So Phil Hardberger Park, although it is in the center of the city and there is development all around it, has a lot of wildlife in it. And I'm always surprised to see how much wildlife is there. The other day I was heading to the office and we had a herd about 20 white-tailed deer grazing through that old maintenance yard, which is right by our office. And I was just surprised to see how many individuals that this area can support.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Debbie, you're next.
I'm pretty sure you've already answered my questions, but also actually, what's the population of San Antonio and the suburbs now?
Oh, that's a good question. I believe we are now the 7th largest city in the nation, and I believe we've are approaching 2 million if we haven't surpassed it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing to me. Anyway, thanks. A really great presentation. It seems that you know everything.
Thank you very much. I was really honored to be asked to share this talk, and I had a lot of fun designing it, and I added a lot about the plants and stuff because I knew Master Naturalist, y'all would have some wonderful questions. So I wanted to make sure to show you all the neat elements of what went into creating this habitat to encourage the wildlife to use the land bridge.
We still have a couple of questions.
Great.
Pam, I think you're next.
Okay, so we live in an area where every road is constantly being widened. So I wondered whether there was any concerns or plans about how to cope with widening your roadway there.
No, that's a great question. And actually, our Wurzbach Parkway is currently under construction right under the land bridge, and it is being widened as we speak. But we knew that that was something that was going to be coming in the future when the designs were being made, and they designed the land bridge wide enough to accommodate an extra lane on either side. So I would say when you're planning that stuff, if you're going over a road, to be mindful of what are the future problems that you might face and plan space for that to be addressed.
Margaret.
Yeah, my question has to do with invasive species. And when I first posed it, I was thinking more of plant species and whether or not just by planting the natives, you're able to sort of squeeze out the invasives, or if you have to take really definitive steps to control them. And but then also thinking about animal species, like what about feral cats? Or, you know, will there be so many deer and not enough native predators that their numbers will get out of control?
Yeah, it's a very real concern. One of the things that the Master Naturalists are very involved in is our park naturalist leads a coalition of volunteers every week called the Weed Warriors, and they encompass the entire park, now including the land bridge, and they go out and they remove invasive plants that have come in. And you know, since we're an island surrounded by development where people plant a lot of non-native and invasive plants, it's a constant problem that we have to manage for. The trap camera study has really kind of given us a glimpse into what is in the park, and that's been really exciting to see the native species. But we have also captured some images of animals that are not supposed to be in the park. We've caught axis deer a couple of times, and we've caught one kitten. I'm surprised we haven't seen more domestic cats since we have so many you know, residential around us, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of cats in the area. But what's really exciting to see is kind of a canary in the coal mine is you know, the presence of the predators. We've caught a lot of photos of a lot of coyotes in the park, bobcats, and the gray fox. And so this ecosystem seems to be fairly balanced at the moment and is supporting all of these different predators. And on top of that, we have owls and hawks and the caracaras and the vultures in the park as well. Some of the problem species that are in the greater central Texas area do not seem to have infiltrated into Hardberger Park yet. Like, we don't have any instances of feral hogs in the area. And we haven't really had any problems with like invasive like stuff with like oak wilt or other things that might be attacking the vegetation. So at the moment, there's some presence of invasives, but nothing that has become overwhelming or alarming.
Bruce, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Teresa, unfortunately, I came in late, so I missed most of what you did. But you did mention a comment about some, not bridges, but some culverts, and that smaller animals can do that. I've seen what I'll call more like tunnels in two places. One in southwestern Colorado on the road from Farmington to Durango. It's a very large one. The road goes over it, but it's a animals go, large animals, deer, et cetera, will go through that one. The other one is kind of a funny one. It's actually in Philmont Scout Ranch in New Mexico. And one of the roads, they have a tunnel under it, which used not just by animals and larger animals, but also by the scouts when they're negotiating from one part of the scout ranch to the other. So people have thought about this for a long time, as you said, in France. I was amazed by that.
Yeah, when I was doing research, I wrote an article for the Master Naturalist about the talking points for the land bridge. And when I was doing the research for that, I found evidence going as far back as the 17th century of rudimentary wildlife crossings. And they'd make fish ladders to help fish cross from one elevation of stream to another. And just this idea that it's centuries old. It's been around for so long, and it's really exciting to see it pick up momentum and be utilized and reimagined and created in different ways.
Well, Teresa, it looks like we have got to the end of the questions, but you've got lots and lots of thank yous and great presentation. And a number of people have suggested that our chapter take a field trip out to see your land bridge in your park. So
that would be absolutely wonderful. If y'all wanted to do that, we could arrange like maybe a golf cart tour or something, depending on how many people would be able to come out. Also, if anybody wants to come out individually, the Conservancy has been running every third Thursday. We're doing golf cart tours to the land bridge for people who are not able to walk to the land bridge for whatever reason. And that's on our website to sign up. And so if anybody's interested in that, or y'all can contact me directly, and I'd love to show y'all around.
That sounds great, Teresa. Okay, I'm going to pass you back over to Lisa. Thank you again so much.
Well, and really quickly, I wanted to thank all of y'all for everything that y'all do. Connecting people to nature is so important, and we've learned how vital that is to the health of our society in the last 2 years. So thank you very much. Time is such a valuable thing, and y'all give your time, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Teresa, I think what Lisa was going to do was simply thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. We certainly appreciate the obvious effort you put into this. We really enjoyed it. We have a land bridge that's going to be built in the Houston area, and we're more excited than ever to see how all that goes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm very excited to see it as well. I look forward to traveling to Houston to walk over it and hopefully drive under it. Thank you.